Welcome in to another vodcast. Shannon Drayer alongside James Osborn, myself. You may know me as Boy Howdy. This is our winter meetings mid-December check-in pre-Christmas list edition of the vodcast. That's a lot, huh?
That's a lot to get out. Congratulations on that.
We're going to go through a handful of things. Later on in this episode, you're going to see a sit-down interview that Shannon and myself get to have with Mariners prospect Logan Gilbert. Really exciting young prospect that the Mariners have a lot of expectations for. Really interested to hear that conversation. We'll also go through some winter meetings updates. We'll go through some hot trade rumors involving some key Mariners, and we'll also talk about the actual trade that did go down with Omar Narvaez earlier last week. So with that, let's go to the winter meetings. They just wrapped up. What are some of the takeaways and things that you got out of the winter meetings?
Wow. I mean, this was a winter meeting like we have not seen in a long time, and it kind of really was getting to the point where, do you even bother going? I mean, nothing is happening at the winter meetings. Everything is either done before, set up before, or it was the last couple of years dragged into after the New Year's. And this year, the hot stove exploded. A lot happened either leading right up into it or during the winter meetings, which is not something that you see very often. You're lucky, in my experience, and I haven't been in, many years, but you were lucky if you saw 2 or 3 deals made or signings made at the winter meetings, and this year obviously was very different, and what we were seeing with the price tags was absolutely, I think, stunning.
Really?
And you have one agent, Scott Boras, who's coming up against $1 billion of transactions right now just in the last week. He's like $860 million worth of 3 transactions, which to me, I'm just trying to kind of digest it, and what does this mean for the game right now? There's been a lot of last couple of years, guys aren't getting signed, players aren't geting paid. There's no problem with the superstars. There's no question they're getting paid, and this year these numbers just seem beyond ridiculous to me. And what does that mean for the game? And I think we're going to have to wait and see until we get to the end. Are there a lot of guys that are still sitting out like there was last year? I'm starting to think there won't be. And what I would like to see is I'd like to see not just the superstars, but I think it's kind of the middle players who are kind of been hurt by what we have seen most lately. And
that's interesting. What would lend you to think that middle class, which has been gradually being underserved as time's gone on, and the numbers for the contracts in that realm are not going up, what lends you to believe now that that's sort of going to shift?
Oh, I don't know that it's going to shift. I think it is underserved, and that's all because of value. All of a sudden, what is distinguishing them from the tier below them is not much, if you break it down the way baseball is now breaking down and able to break down value. So it can be a tough thing. I think also you see things like, and I've said this for a couple of years, but it's not enough to be good at one thing in this game. You need to, if you're an offensive player, you've got to have some defensive presence or value as well. We look at what Nelson Cruz has gone through the last few years to get signed. I don't think you can ask for a better DH, but it's not really valued to the point where the deal that he signed last year, he's actually going to get paid, I believe it's $1 million less this year than he did last year. He didn't get that big contract despite clearly being the best at what he does. So, and I think it's because it is one thing. It is just, he just hits. We already know that the loogies, your left-only guys, are probably going to be next to extinct with the new rules going into place where every reliever has to face 3 batters or bump into the end of the inning. But we've already seen that start to happen. That's not something that is new. So I think it all goes down, or a lot of it goes down to just the values and how they are kind of managing numbers and putting numbers, and it's something that is going to have to be addressed with many, many other things. But you can't say that money is not being spent right now. Money is being spent. And the last note in what we've seen is obviously a year ago you had so many teams that were kind of sitting it out, rebuilding, restructuring. Some were tanking, and my definition of tank is do your worst to try and get a pick. That's not what the Mariners were doing last year. They were not doing that. They were not trying to go after the pick.
Agree to disagree, but yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Were they actively trying to lose last year to get a draft pick?
Yeah.
No, they were
Yeah.
not.
No. They designed that team to lose games.
Never the edict.
They designed that team to lose games. They spent $0 on that bullpen. They did not want to win games.
It might appear that
Scott
way.
Services wanted to win games.
It might, that might be the result, but that is not what they set out.
All right.
They weren't going to, not to lose games, or they weren't going to pay a bullpen to win games that didn't matter. when you can spend those dollars later. It's a different thing. But aside from that point, a lot more teams were active this year. All of a sudden, it's the Angels' time. They're going to spend now. They did spend. The Rangers, I think, were a little bit shocking. I thought they were going to spend. They're moving into a new building.
They were planning on doing it. They just lost. And now who's left to spend on?
Yeah, but I mean, the way they lost, they made the decision to lose. They weren't going to go the extra years. It wasn't an extra year for Rendon. They had a very definite 4 or 5 years that they were going to go for him. So that to me is a little shocking for a team that was expected to go out and make a splash. That's not how you make a splash. You make a splash by doing what the Yankees did, which I really have to wonder, were they bidding against themselves at the end? Is this where he always wanted to be? Because you heard that the Angels did not go 9 years with him. No other team went those years or those dollars. So why did the Yankees go that far? Well, thank you, Scott Boras. But that's where he wanted to be. And he got paid to be there. And, you know, it's a stunning number. Strasburg, we're not even bringing that up. It's a really great story. Yeah, he's staying with the same organization. But yeah, he's set the bar way up there, which is what helped to get Cole paid. And that didn't enable the Nationals to hold on to another player that they would have loved to have kept with them forever. So I don't know. There's an imbalance right now. And, you know, if you're at the top of the food chain right now, you're in great shape.
So let's look at the division then and how these moves and the winter meetings so far have shaped what the AL West looks like. You have a new player in Los Angeles. You got no new players in Texas. In fact, one exits with Nomar Mazara leaving. And you've got the Oakland A's who are doing Oakland A's stuff all the time. And the Astros lose Garrett Cole. So where are you seeing this division trending in the short term and in the long term with some of these moves that have been made?
I think we'll really get into this after the new year. I think this would be a great thing to get out the whiteboard, maybe get out the note cards and the tape again and do something like that, you know, and just really kind of take a look. First things first, I think I joked about this for a few weeks because, I mean, I understand. Everybody wants the Mariners to do well. They want the team to win. They want to go and be able to support a winning team and experience a playoff. I want to too. That'd be fantastic. It's not going to happen overnight. We know what the plan is. Will it work? We don't know. But we know what it is. They're sticking to it. It seems sound. There are no guarantees. We'll see what happens. But I kind of joked a little bit, and I'm like, they're not spending this offseason. That's been established. They're not really trading this offseason. You know, it's been like 4 months since Jerry Dipoto has traded a player. He's traded, one player in 4 months.
Yeah.
That's odd.
It's pretty small.
But that's what he said he was going to do.
Yeah.
And they're to a point where, and I think this should be comforting in some point, where you have to stop at some point. You don't trade everybody. You have to, you know, you are going to continue to build up the minor leagues, but the initial push is out of the way right now, and these are the guys you're going to build around. You're not going to need to build a core class every year and keep trading and trading and trading to get that number of players. You will trade here and there. But back to the original point, I was sitting back knowing what the plan was going to be, and I'm like, you know, it's going to be really fun when the Angels sign Garrett Cole and the Rangers sign Anthony Rendon, and we're sitting here, people are not going to be happy. Kind of halfway happened right there, but that's where they are right now.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. I think that the plan is pretty clear that this last year and the one that's coming up, they're not anticipating trying to put themselves in a position where the playoff roster is what they're going for. They want to set themselves up so that when they do deem themselves ready to go for the playoffs, and I'm growing increasingly optimistic that they can have an outside shot of doing that in 2021, so in 2 seasons. I'm increasingly optimistic that if the cards fall correctly, they could be a competitive team then. This is how this is supposed to go. It lends to some other questions that we'll talk about in Mitch Haniger and Marco Gonzalez, both names we've talked about before, and differ a little bit on some of our feelings on what should happen with them. But you look at the division and how it is shaping up. The Astros are going through scandal, and they just lost their best pitcher. So how is the future of the Astros looking just on a surface level after the moves that have been made so far?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And just we have to throw in right now is you don't panic just because you saw these big moves. You stay with your plan, and hopefully you are making the moves. And you said in a couple of years, I think they start making the moves next offseason. I think we could see it at the trade deadline this year, if all goes well, and if there's an opportunity there. The Astros, that was the biggest eye-opener. You know, we're still waiting to see what the penalties are going to be. I think we're all assuming that they are going to lose draft picks along the line somewhere. I think they should lose draft picks along the line somewhere. But I think one of the most stunning things to come out of the winter meetings, and it shouldn't have been, but still when you hear it from elsewhere, was when Ken Rosenthal reported that the Astros are looking into trading Carlos Correa because they are in serious budget trouble with the luxury tax. They are well over the luxury tax right now, and that's still needing a starting pitcher, and that's still needing a starting catcher, and still needing to add to that bullpen as well. And I'd been following it. I had not been following it in the right places, and I had not been looking at it close enough. I think that when the Jerry Dipoto and group came out with a plan and said we are targeting this because at some point the Astros, this is what we're talking about right now, is going to happen, I don't think we completely believed it. And then when they went and they made the moves that they made at the deadline this year, in adding Sanchez and in adding Greinke, I was like, they're just going to keep spending. That's all there is to it. They're not going to, budget's
Caution
not
to the
going
wind.
to be a factor.
Yep.
They're just going to, they're going to go Yankees on us right now. And I had been watching COTS is always a good resource for contracts, and I'd just been watching kind of the main page of that. What I hadn't been looking too much at were the future contracts and the luxury contract, or the luxury tax numbers, which are different. And when Rosenthal pointed to the resource with that, and you saw it right in front of you, you're like, whoa. Because when you're watching their payroll during the year, you're looking 160, they add 170. You look at what they're lining up for right now, their luxury tax payroll is around 238.
That's like $20 million, $28 million over the limit.
And during the season, there was talk that if they had won the World Series, they would make a push after Garrett Cole. I don't know how they could have done that. But now everything is falling apart for them. And
interesting.
That, to the point where, and I'll say this, they're not particularly high on Carlos Correa, so it shouldn't be a surprise that that's the name that they talk about. He's a good player. He's tough to keep out on the field. And in being tough to keep out on the field, he's somebody that's not always reliable. Are we going to have him out there? So that being the name doesn't surprise me. They love George Springer. His arbitration number is going to be around $21 million. The thing I don't get was the Greinke signing. And that's if you had that $35 million to do other things with right now, then you'd be out Greinke as a pitcher. But I'm not convinced that, he's not Garrett Cole.
No, he's much older too, and his stuff's not there either.
Yeah.
But he's a very intelligent, very talented, very accomplished pitcher who they believe is probably in the Justin Verlander mold of projectable. We expect him to perform at a relatively stable, similar way throughout the rest of his career. But you're right, he's not Garrett Cole in terms of talent, and he's not going to go in and take over a game like that, like Cole can.
No, I don't think it's Justin Verlander either.
Right, I mean, stuff-wise,
who was the Cy
sure.
Young Award winner. I would have gone for Garrett Cole myself, but
Yeah.
that just seemed like that was a little bit overkill. So they right now, on top of everything else, find themselves in a bad payroll situation.
That's interesting. I don't know that I have the same concerns about payroll and future that you have, but if they do start making these decisions to start trimming back just for the sake of having a more palatable future financially, then absolutely, this does speed up. I would be surprised if it was the finances that ended up taking the Astros down. I think there's more of a locker room, clubhouse culture along with the backlash that's going to come their way from the sign stealing stuff and everything that's gone through in a leadership perspective of that organization. I would imagine that's the thing that ends up taking them down faster than anything. But
no, I don't
you could
think
be right.
clubhouse has been a problem with them for a few years. And
Not
I've been
yet.
in that clubhouse for a while. So
Not yet.
I have seen it where it hasn't always been great, and it's actually been pretty good, I'd say, the last 3 years. But yeah, we'll see what happens with the sign stealing and how that plays into it. And if they lose draft picks, I mean, that might be, if they know that they are going to lose those draft picks, what's to say they don't, time to launch the new rebuild and target 4 years out at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to the Angels. They just recently added Anthony Rendon. They now have something around $128 million racked up a year for the next 2 years between Albert Pujols, Justin Upton, Mike Trout, and Anthony Rendon. 4 hitters, one of which is bad, another which is almost bad in Justin Upton.
You better hope he is.
There's
because he's
lot.
had periods of time when he's been very on and has been a very dangerous.
But that's a lot right there on a team that was already short pitching, that has been chronically short pitching for a while. how much of a difference, where do you see this thing going? Joe Madden's now the manager.
Yeah.
Mike Sociaball is out. There's a lot of change, yet does the outlook for the Angels look all that much different?
Well, I think this is a to be determined. Let's not forget that they've got a good farm system that they are going to draw from. And that's something that some of the other teams that you look around perhaps don't. That doesn't factor in as much, but they're looking at guys that are starting to be ready to come up and contribute right now. I would feel a lot better if those numbers that you just all mentioned weren't 2 years, but were 4 years. They're finally coming out of the Albert Pujols. They're getting close.
Next year and the year
line.
after the final years.
And that is critical to them. It's funny because I look at Texas, and every time I look at Texas, I'm like, what's their plan? You know, for everything they did to build up to what they were, 5, 6, 7 years ago, and all of a sudden Daniels was the genius, and that was the model that you wanted. Now you don't see what it is.
Yeah.
And I thought it was spend, and then they don't go spend, and they've got money coming in. So that's a head shaker for me. But you look at the Angels right now, and I think that you do have to kind of keep a wary eye on them right now. I think they do have some young pitching that can come up. They do have Ohtani. Let's not forget that right now. And if you can keep him healthy, he's shown that he can be a major factor in that right now. And they said that they are going to spend more to get some pitching. So I think we have to wait and see what happens on that end.
Yeah, I'll be curious about the Angels. I have been on the record saying that I think their window, and I don't think this Rendon deal changes it, is the next 2 years. I think they've got a legitimate shot if everything breaks perfectly with Joe Madden at the helm and with Shohei Ohtani healthy and Trout and Rendon, these guys all in their prime. They've got 1 or 2 years, but they've got a meddlesome owner. They like to throw money around at things that...
I think he finally threw it in a good direction.
It's possible. It's possible.
It's not
but
Josh Hamilton. It's not Albert Pujols. I think he finally...
He is in his prime. He's coming off a great season, but he has an injury history. I mean, there is an element of that that's always present with Rendon, that he had missed time as a prospect. He's missed time in the majors. It's not a perfect deal. He's not Manny Machado in terms of his health. So I think there's an interesting dynamic that you've got 3 great hitters. You've got a pretty subpar to me roster outside of your core. Like you mentioned, they've got Joe Adell, who's on the fringe, who's a top 10 prospect in baseball in the outfield. They've got a couple other guys, especially in the starting rotation, that look like they could be promising, but I'm just not so sure that they have a full, complete roster. And now, for the next 3, 5, even 6 years, if you project out their arbitrations, they have $150 million on the books every year just to base on their arbitration projections, even with the guys they already have. So it's an interesting thing that I don't know that they have much more flexibility once this season's over. Moving forward, I think this is the roster they have to win with.
Which is why they spent now.
Yeah, so it's really, I think this is a risky gamble with an old coach and a brand new style. I think that there is a big recipe for there to be some underperformance in the next 2 years, but they are definitely making a push for it at a time when the Mariners are not. So that's actually good news for me.
I love how you say an old coach in a time of a new style, because it was Madden who was the guy forever, and now he's looking more old school than a lot of the things that we're seeing, which is something I don't think people completely realize.
They're a strange brew. It's like throwing like 13 of your favorite ingredients in, but having never tested whether or not those things actually work together.
Yeah.
And you're just going to put it in the oven and take it out, and you hope that it turns into a great dish. That's how I view the Angels, and we'll be curious.
They've got some things hanging over them, too, with their investigations that are going on after the Tyler Skaggs death as well. And I hope they don't uncover anything else, but there were some accusations that there were others. We don't know if they were past or if they were current, but that there were problems in that clubhouse. And that's one thing that Major League Baseball did.
It's a small update, actually. Today,
this morning,
they came out with.
They came out with an opioid policy. And I think it's a good one. I don't believe they were testing for opioids. They are going to test for them now. And it's not a situation where it's a suspension, but if you do test positive for opioids, they're going to help you. Yeah. And as long as you accept that help, you will not be penalized.
Right. Yeah, this is a really interesting, I think, innovative and cool thing that baseball is doing. Just a quick synopsis. Rob Manfred, the MLB commissioner, announced this morning there's a joint drug agreement with the Players Association that now makes marijuana something they still test for, but you won't be entered into a mandatory recovery program anymore.
They did not test for that at the major league level.
Yeah, so we want you, if they uncover high levels.
Marijuana is for the minor leagues.
That also came announced today. We can get into some some more of that later, but they moved it to the same rulings as alcohol,
Right.
the same way that they treat that. So if you, for some reason, tested for it, there are no longer fines for being popped for marijuana. However, they are going to start testing for opioids, including cocaine and synthetic marijuana. And like you said, there are no punishments if you test positive. You get entered into a mandatory treatment program that's agreed between the Players Association and the league. And if you choose not to follow that treatment plan, that's when discipline can start. So
And
I think
in
it's
the
a cool policy.
minors, marijuana is no longer a substance of abuse, so you cannot get, because a lot of kids got suspended for it.
Yeah.
So that is no longer. And I think this was a pretty fast reaction, and I think it's good to see it's warranted with what happened. And I don't think they're going to be public with, oh, well, this person, they shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be.
They shouldn't be, but they're going to get a better handle on it than they did. It looks like they're taking some responsibility for it.
Yeah.
Right now, you're in our clubhouse, we're going to know what's going on.
So let's transition into the Mariners. The Mariners have made one move since we had last done a video, trading Omar Narvaez away for a prospect and a draft pick. What can you tell us in your synopsis of how this deal happened and what it looks like?
What really jumped out at me because I think we were all trying to, what can they get from Omar Narvaez? We knew he was going to be traded, and he was going to be traded because of the defense. They acquired him. They had hoped that they could work with him on the defense and get it to a point where it was along the lines of what they wanted to see back there. They saw some progression with it. They didn't see enough, and in the meantime, they picked up two catchers who showed what they did want to see in Tom Murphy and Austin Nola. And so all of a sudden, they had a pretty nice trade chip. And I think a lot of people looked at, well, he hit this. This move had nothing to do with offense whatsoever. This move had everything to do with defense and everything to do with the young pitchers that are coming up. They want to put those young pitchers in the best hands that they possibly can. And pitch framing matters. And the young pitchers, a lot of them, those who went through AA had one of the best pitch framers in all of baseball. They're used to this. Joe Odom down at AA is one of the best pitch framers by most of the metrics. So no surprise that he was moved. The return, I think that kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier. It's not enough to do one thing. And catcher, it's not just the Mariners who value catcher defense. Most of baseball does. That is a defense-first position just about everywhere. When you think about all of the dollars and the investment that you make in pitching, you're not going to have just anybody catch them. And so I don't know, I think we will wait and see what we see other catchers go for to see if, was this as out of whack as some people think it was. Well, we're going to have to wait and see. But for a catcher without defense, I think it was a tougher sell than what people were expecting. What jumped out at me when we got the press release is it didn't say anything about Adam Hill, the quote.
Yeah, which is nice for me. I looked at Adam Hill and I was like, I don't see any way where this is something that merits a player that's probably going to play at least 80 games starting behind the plate for some team and provide above average defense, regardless of how bad you think of his defense. I'm sorry.
He is not.
Not above average defense.
Okay.
He's going to play above average offense, and he's going to play
Right.
80 games behind the plate, no matter how bad his defense
Well, in
is.
the
That's
National
what
League,
he's
he's
going to do.
going to.
Yeah, and no matter what, he's going to play behind the plate. So, and his offense is going to merit that for some team. And it's going to be a contending team because there's no reason for a non-contending team to add this guy. So I thought, to me, that's an interesting thing to look the value of that guy and see a prospect to me that is the next Chase DeYoung. I mean, he's a guy that doesn't have anything that stands out on his repertoire or his rap sheet that would say this guy's going to be a solid major league player moving forward. He looks more like a depth piece, the guy you bring up in July when all of a sudden you're out a pitcher and you don't want to burn a roster spot. That's kind of what he looks like to me, which is fine, but that's not what you trade a platoon starting position player for, right? So the draft pick, when that draft pick came in, which is some people say the 70th, 71st pick in the draft, when they identified that as the thing they were really going for, that made a lot of sense to me. And especially hearing some of the things I'd heard behind the scenes, that the Mariners do feel really confident about the prospects they have right now, regardless of what I may think. They feel like that stable is set.
Yeah.
To keep this thing moving instead of having it be a Dustin Ackley, Mike Zunino era thing where you had this one group and nothing, and you went all in on this one group and you traded everything right after it, and then you were left with nothing. to actually start to identify and say, we do think we're fine. We're set with these prospects. Now we got to figure out how to make sure that the next wave comes through so that we have enough tools to supplement this team and to trade from. So I thought that getting that draft pick, being able to identify a specific player, a younger player who could be a part of the next wave of Mariners that come through, I think it's a valuable thing. I'd like it not to be the 70th pick. I'd like it to be a first-rounder, but Omar Narvaez just wasn't going to get that. That's too much value.
I think this is all about the first-rounder. I don't think it's about number 70. I think it's about number 6.
It's possible.
I think it's the dollars that come with that pick, and DePoto did actually talk a little bit about that in DePoto speak, it lets them access something different.
And for those who are not real familiar with the minor league draft, there's a certain amount of money that you can spend on your entire draft, and every pick has an amount of money that you anticipate it should be worth. And for the Mariners, say there's an 18-year-old pitcher that they like at pick number 6, but he thinks he's a top 3 kind of guy, and he's only going to go for that kind of money. Being able to move some of the money from your later picks into that pick and pay him more may entice a greater talented person to actually sign with you. So maybe get a top 3 talent at the 6th pick because you have that money, right?
Which I think is more the value of those supplemental round picks. I think that people are more looking at the dollar figure than they are looking at, well, I get, an extra player, or I get this, kind of this level of prospect. I think it is either to throw it at your number 1 pick or to spread it out more and go over slot for a number of players. I think for the Mariners, in talking with Jerry DePoto, I think he's got his eye on making a splash with that 6th pick. And if that's the case, I think we see another trade for another pick. Because, so they have the number 6 pick and the slot money that comes with the number 6 pick. They now have the 70 pick or 71, whatever it turns out to be, and the money that comes with that. That's great. That seems like, okay, so you've got an extra $1 million. Well, the teams in front of them in the draft also have complimentary picks or supplemental. I'm like really screwing up my competitive balance picks and whatnot. I'm getting all my sports all mixed up at the same time. They've got Group A. They've got picks after the first round, so they've already got extra dollars. So I just kind of trying to put 2 and 2 together here. I think Jerry is going to push hard to get another pick for those dollars so that he can outspend that group in front of him, unless the group in front of him, obviously teams that finish worse than the Mariners, they are in different states of rebuild, and I would say all of them, further behind the Mariners in the rebuild process, they might be teams, or at least a couple of them might be teams that want to spread it out more. So we'll see. But they might also be guys that are looking for more college, closer to the big leagues ready guys, because their next core of prospects is not yet there yet. Right.
So they want more people in that category.
I have a feeling that he's going to need more to do what I think he wants to do.
Interesting.
Which is pretty non-specific there. But on that note, some news on somebody that they did do that with. Was it 3 years ago? Sam Carlson.
2017 supplemental first-round draft pick.
And used and spent, I think it was $1 million over slot to get him. Known this for a while, but it came out of the meetings again yesterday. He, of course, had the Tommy John surgery right after he was drafted, or within the year after he was drafted. It seemed like it was taking forever for him to come back, and there were a lot of questions. I've addressed this in a couple of different places, but if you didn't know, they didn't pitch him last year because by the time he was ready, there was nowhere really to pitch him.
This is 2 full seasons, essentially, he had missed.
Right. I mean, they could have pitched him, but the competition wasn't worth it, just for a handful of innings, and the determination was made, this guy who was still a teenager, he was a high school pick, has spent 2 years recovering and rehabbing. Let's let him have an off season now. Let him have a regular off season and come into camp next year, coming off of a normal off season, 100%. There is no need to push for maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks of work at the end of last year. But he was a player that they did what we were just talking about with, and it'll be interesting to see what he does. We keep talking about the Logan Gilberts, who we're going to hear from later. And the 3 picks that they made last year, let's not forget Sam Carlson is in there as well.
Yeah, so let's transition to the Rule 5 draft. Not a huge update, but the Mariners did have the 6th pick in the Rule 5 draft, and they did choose a pitcher from the Houston Astros system. A bullpen piece, it sounds like. What can you tell us about their newest addition?
Yohan Ramirez, 24, will turn 25 early on in the season next year. Power arm, big fastball, big stuff guy, I was told, has 2 power breaking balls, 2 hard breaking balls. Big strikeout numbers, big walk numbers, which I think is what you would expect to be available in the Rule 5 draft. Mariners are hopeful, and we had Brian DeLunas on earlier. We talked about what they do with their pitchers, how they break it down, how they use analytics, how they use an entire coaching staff, biomechanics, their entire peak performance department to try and improve players. They're going to try and do that with him. And what was really attractive about him, on top of the upside stuff-wise, was he was a starter mainly. He did pitch, I think, 8 or 10 times out of the pen last year. That means that he can give him innings.
And throughout his minor league career, actually, he's almost identically split his time between the starting rotation and from the bullpen, from what I can read and gather. And from what I can see, the Mariners don't have a lot of that swing category. They used to be just their system was rife with those guys.
Right.
They had so many guys that constantly were in that swing category. And the Tommy Malones of the world, before Tommy Malone became like a full-time starter all the time.
Tommy Malone.
So
You got to have a Tommy Malone.
You got to have at least one.
You got to have one, yeah.
Yeah, and then you find a way to
Why
block.
not have Tommy Malone then? You know,
Exactly.
I'd be fine with that.
Right. So, but getting a guy that actually does have some swing versatility is something
Right.
that they don't really have at their major league level.
But one of the things that was kind of interesting here is we know that the rotation is more or less set. You know that Marco Gonzalez, Yusei Kikuchi, Justice Sheffield are going to be in there. Justin Dunn, we're not quite as sure if he has a really good spring. And that doesn't mean his numbers, that means how he shows. Does he throw his changeup as much as they want him to? What does it look like? They take everything out because of atmosphere and spring and everything else. They'll evaluate him a little bit differently. If he's ready, he'll start with a big club. If he's not, he'll start and he'll be in the minors for a little while. And then Kendall Graveman as well. But I was kind of wondering this, and it got answered yesterday. Are we going to see openers next year? And my preference is let's not. There are times when I'm fine with it. If you've got a lineup that is stacked at the top of it and you think you really can get an advantage by
Like the
throwing,
Angels now.
perfect example. If you've got a Mike Trout killer in that front in your bullpen, why not wheel him out there at the beginning for some pitchers? But just to arbitrarily do it, we don't think you can get through this many innings. I like it if it's targeted. I don't want it just you get an opener, you get an opener, you definitely get an opener. I don't need to, I don't like to see that. But DePoto was talking about, and he's talked about this a little bit in the picture. They are looking for another reliever, and they're looking for a veteran reliever because they got a lot of young guys down the bullpen. And then the possibility of another starter who is more of a swing guy, a guy that is versatile and that they can use in different ways. I don't think the Rule 5 pick is that guy. I think they're still looking for that. But what he talked about last night wasn't so much using an opener, but more piggybacking some of the younger pitchers.
Combining them, essentially viewing them as teams, right?
Getting them on an innings limit, and the way that they control those innings is, Justin, you're a starter, you go out there and start, but you're only pitching 4 innings today. Then you would have a guy that could come in.
Yeah.
And they've talked about that a lot. We haven't seen it on a regular
It's the same
basis.
philosophy as an opener, except it's flipped, right? It's saying...
No.
I mean,
it's not,
really, it's saying you're the starter, you're going
Right.
to go this amount of time. We're going to pair you. We know that this guy's going to come in next. We're just going to plan that this guy's going to get 2 or 3 innings.
Yeah, but you're doing it for different reasons. The opener you are doing because you don't think the guy can get through, or you're doing because it benefits the guy to pitch in the shorter stint, or the reliever is more favorable than the starter. This would be strictly we're doing this to control your innings, with the intention of you're going to stretch them out. I don't want Justice Sheffield should never need an opener or never need somebody to pitch 2 or 3 innings for him down the road. Maybe it helps a little bit right now. Same with Justin Dunn. I think it's more of an ease them into the big leagues type thing and handle them correctly rather than strategic in-game type. This is why we're doing this.
All right, so that sort of wraps up the Rule 5, the winter meetings, the division. Now we move on to some of the juicy stuff. The stuff that remains. Coming up, we'll have our interview with Logan Gilbert. But right now, I want to get into some of the things that we anticipate may end up happening, or at least conversations that are going to happen all the way up to the start of spring training. And I think that revolves around the pieces that the Mariners still have value in, specifically in Mitch Haniger. There were rumors that came out of the winter meetings that teams had been asking. I think I saw somebody quoting Jared DePoto saying that he was the 3rd most asked about Mariner in the meetings that
Behind the catcher.
behind the 2 catchers, behind
Murphy
Austin
and
Nola
Nola,
and
who-
Tom Murphy. Everyone's looking for catching talent and catchers who could potentially hit. So Mitch Haniger, coming off of basically a lost season, didn't have great performance, had some flashes, and then missed a ton of time due to his ruptured testicle and a subsequent back injury. And now coming back, he's heading into, his first or second year of arbitration?
First year.
First year of arbitration, so we'll have 2 more years following that. He's 28, going on 29 years old. What are you hearing? What do you expect to see out of this Mitch Haniger situation? I'm going to call it a situation because teams are asking, and the Mariners clearly are not saying absolutely no, but they're holding value. So what do you see is happening right now with Mitch Haniger and the Mariners?
Well, what I hope happens with Mitch Haniger and the Mariners, and I think coming into the offseason, I've thought for some time that this is somebody that eventually is going to be traded. And a lot of people around the game thinks that he is somebody who eventually is going to be traded. Partly because of what you have coming up, partly because of his age and where he will be at the end of that contract, and partly because of that age and where he'll be and whatnot. This would be somebody that they would want to sign to an extension. And if he doesn't sign an extension, I think I see them moving him. So I think that, prime candidate at some point to get moved. And obviously, after last year, you would think, well, the value's not there. This is a terrible time to move him. That would seem to be conventional wisdom on that. When this rumor came up, I made a couple of phone calls, and I talked to a couple of people with other clubs in division and asked for their evaluation of Mitch Haniger, and was basically told that they didn't buy much of what he did last year, in the negative.
So you're saying that he retained his value?
He retained his value from the people that I talked to. Doesn't mean a club's not going to go in and say, well, he did this last year, so we're just going to give you this. I don't think Jerry Dipoto is going to do that. I think he is going to keep the premium on Mitch Haniger. You don't need to move him. There is no reason to. I'm not worried about, if you don't believe he's at his peak value right now, you absolutely shouldn't, because he is going to show better in your mind at that point, regardless of how the other side is looking at him. If somebody comes in and blows him away with a deal, yeah, you can pull the trigger on that. But I don't see that happening immediately, but I was really, really interested to hear that he does appear to still have value around the league for what we saw the year before. And specifically, keep an eye on it, but if somebody is specifically looking for not just an outfielder, but a right-handed outfielder, he will have even more value to them. Sometimes that's a tough thing, or a tough market to find, but he would be of particular interest to teams that don't have that flexibility and need to put a righty out there where handedness comes into play.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear you say that based on your conversations. That's great insight. That's really good stuff. I know you and I have talked about this for years now, 2 years, because I talked about it last year with you as well, and I wanted them to move on whenever they got good value for him, because when I look at the Seattle Mariners as a playoff team, at soonest in 2021, I just don't see how Mitch Haniger is going to be there for the whole run. And if he's not going to be there for the whole run, I say you get something that is going to be there. What's more likely, that Mitch Haniger is on the Mariners World Series team, or that one of the guys they trade him for is a part of their playoff run moving forward? And I think the latter is probably more likely. I don't want them to sell low. That's never been what I've thought. But to me, if I'm looking at Mitch Haniger's career and what he's shown and proven, even last year he had great stretches of play, even though the numbers on the whole weren't high. He misses time with injury. That's what he has always struggled with throughout his major league career. What can he show in 3 months of baseball before the trade deadline that's going to take away that fear for you? To me, that fear is a long-term, that's going to be proven over years that this injury thing is behind him. Not the specific injury, but this proclivity to get injured. So I would say that if you can move on from him and you get something that you feel is close to value, I'd do that deal. I'd make that deal. If you truly believe that your outfield of the future is in the minor leagues, and it's Kyle Lewis and it's Julio Rodriguez and it's Jared Kelenic and Jake Fraley and all these other guys that they talk about, then Mitch Haniger's not a part of that to me. And I think you need to make that move when you can. And I am curious. I do think that they're going to find a way to move on from Mitch Haniger this offseason.
Yeah, and if you don't do that, then you almost need to be looking at those other guys to trade for something, because you're not going to bring everything. You're not going to buy everything when it's time. You're going to have to make deals. So, maybe Mitch Haniger you get a draft pick for, and that turns into something down the road that, and it did not just a draft pick, but it turns into something down the road that brings you something back. I hate to see Mitch go. I enjoy Mitch Haniger as a person and as a player, but I think that when you look at this, he seems like kind of the last logical piece that you move. And at that point, you're hoping that, okay, this is the group, and you're not seeing as many of the trades. There are a couple of players, obviously D. Gordon is somebody that needs to be moved. If you're going to play Shed Long every day, you've got to move D. Gordon.
And there's not a lot of value there. He's been on a downward trend the last 2 seasons with the Mariners, and he's no longer considered even, I don't think, the Gold Glove defender that he had used to be either. So I think that's another mitigating factor. I just don't see how much value he has with a $13 million contract in a time when average to slightly above average position players are just not being valued after the age of 30.
I think the defense is still there, and I think it's invaluable what he brings when he's out on the field. As far as you're looking for your quarterback of the infield, he's it. He is as smart a baseball player out there, and he is willing to take that on and lead it. And he's absolutely savvy back there, and he's helped J.P. Crawford. I think he would be great for another team that is starting to rebuild, and he can help with those young infielders. I don't think he's fallen off much on the defense at all. I think with him, health, and also, at some point you got to get on base, and it's got to not always be by the hit, because that wasn't happening for him. But I think regardless, and I think we agree, it's going to be a tough sell.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think with that, is there anything left you want to cover? Can we get to this interview with Logan Gilbert?
Let's get to this interview. I'm really excited about this, and this is a first. This will be the first time we've had a 7:10 Skype interview.
That's right,
so
yeah.
How many takes do you think this is going to take?
Oh, none.
We're going to nail it on
no
the first
takes.
one?
Absolutely.
Taylor
Totally
Jacobs
unfiltered.
has got this all set up.
Hashtag
It's all
unfiltered.
going at it, just absolutely perfect. So, yeah, we've been looking forward to this, and I hope we get to do this a few times throughout the winter. We've got this nice set. We've got all sorts of different ways that we can bring interviews and players to you, and we're going to attempt to do a Skype interview with Logan Gilbert, who I think it is all but certain, if he stays healthy, we're going to see him next year in Seattle.
Wow.
So we're going to learn a little bit more about Logan Gilbert right now. Okay, we're back with you, and as promised, we have Logan Gilbert with us via Skype. What we do not have is Boy Howdy is not here. Sadly, he called in sick today, so I'm on my own here, but I think we're going to get through this. Logan, great to see you. It's been a couple of months. We saw you up in Seattle at the end of the season. Where do we find you right now?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm actually back home in Apopka, Florida, living at home.
Tell us about Apopka. It's in the Orlando area, from what I understand.
Yeah, it's right outside Orlando. It's pretty nice here. I mean, not one of the biggest cities or anything like that, but, just kind of like a small hometown feel to it, and it's really nice. I like it here.
Born and raised there?
Yep, that's right.
All right. What's the best thing when you get to go home? What's the first thing that you have to do when you get home?
Gosh, I like golfing around here, like going to the beach. When I get back to Florida, that's always a bonus, nice thing to do.
How far from the beach are you?
I'm about an hour either way. We're right in Central Florida, so I can go to either coast.
You got a surfer on the team. Did you used to surf?
Oh, no, I can't say that I did, yeah. I've always wanted to, but I'm not too good at it.
Well, you got plenty of time at some point. That can be on the list. Hey, just a great story. We all know, that you're selected first by the Mariners in the draft a couple of years ago, and I can't imagine what that is like when you're in your college career and everything is gearing up. And as far as everything that you're doing in college and your playoffs, your College World Series, your season, and oh, by the way, there is a draft right now. What was that week like for you?
Yeah, that's crazy. It's kind of hectic. A lot's going on, but at the same time, you just try to enjoy it because, you're deep in a college season with all your best friends, and also the draft's coming up. Everything I've worked for my whole life in terms of baseball. So it's pretty chaotic, a lot going on, but also really rewarding when all of that is happening at the same time.
What would you say was the highlight of your college career?
I think there at the end, we made it. We actually won a regional and went to a super regional, first time in Stetson history. So it was kind of nice to one of the best seasons in such a long history of Stetson baseball.
It is a long history and some notable arms there as well. Did they have influence on you?
Not too much. I haven't gotten to talk to him, but I remember on my recruiting visit was the day DeGrom won the Rookie of the Year. So it was a pretty big deal, a lot of buzz going on around there, and that's when I kind of thought this could be a great place for pitchers to come out of here.
Not bad coming out like DeGrom, I would imagine, or Kluber as well.
Exactly.
How did you decide on Stetson?
It was pretty close here. I knew a couple people that went there and heard great things. The academics were great, which was a big part of where I wanted to go, and then also the baseball, just a nice tradition, and some of the arms that came out of there, of course, made it pretty easy to choose there.
What was your major?
Business analytics.
Oh.
Yeah.
And how does that apply? Does that help with the baseball?
Not too much, actually. I decided on it because I watched the movie Moneyball, actually, and I got really interested in that side of it with all the analytics and baseball. So, who knows? Maybe after when I'm done playing, I can get into that side of things.
What kind of jumped out of you in that movie?
I think just all the little things kind of behind the scenes that go into winning a ball game, and everybody, of course, the talent's so important, but if you're not using it the right way, there's little stats that can really matter a long time in winning games.
Have you been to the Oakland Coliseum yet?
I haven't. I actually played out in California, so I wasn't too far away from it. I got to see the Giants Park, but I didn't go to the Oakland's.
Okay, they're a little different.
Yeah. That's right here.
It's funny. No, that movie jumps out at me, and obviously there's the numbers and the history and everything that happened in that movie, but the behind the scenes of that movie are exactly, that is like walking in on a game day to Oakland Coliseum, the hallways, the people that they had in the movie, everything. That is really still it. So that'll be a special treat for you when you get up to the big leagues.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. That's so cool. I'd love to see that one day.
Yeah, it's definitely a different experience in baseball. How do you use analytics on a daily basis?
There's a lot that goes into it for pitching. I kind of just got exposed to it this year, and it was a big part of it, seeing some of the numbers where we look at spin direction, spin rate, release height, release angle, all these different things that go into it. I always thought you pretty much just grip it and throw the ball, but there's so much more that goes into it, from releasing the ball and then its actual flight in the air, how it lands across home plate.
Can you explain, because these are things they're terms that I think baseball fans are getting more familiar with now, and I think even if you watch the World Series, you started to see a little bit more of this in some of the broadcasts. They can be tough concepts to grasp onto, and we've actually done some videos talking about this. I know Brian DeLunas, he came in and he explained a lot of this too, but as a pitcher, how do you use that? How do you take a look at it? How do you adjust when you take a look at it? What are the things that are most useful to you?
Yeah, so just a couple things that stick out for me. I think every pitcher is different, but it really resonates with me, the spin direction of the ball. So thinking of a clock and where the numbers are, certain pitches will either stay in the air longer or maybe drop off depending on which the spin direction is. So for a fastball, I want to be more towards 12 o'clock, where my changeup will be more towards like 2:30 on a clock, so it can just fall throughout the air. So different ways like that, just depending on the way the ball's spinning, it makes it move certain ways.
How obviously you get to you have access to some of these things, I would imagine, in college, but how did they impact what you did this year?
It was a huge part of it. From the developing all the way from, I think, to spring training to the end of the season, I think I see a huge jump in the way my pitches performed and the way they were coming out of my hand. Everything was a little sharper and more consistent, where a big part of it was I knew every time I threw it, the pitch was pretty much going to do the same thing, instead of kind of guessing where I would need to start it or something like that.
Oh, wow. That's a big game changer, that knowing rather than guessing when you go out there. And it's just amazing how much that, I think you summed it up. It's like you think things just happen, or you have it or you don't, but there are ways to keep it or to improve on it. Pretty impressive right there. Hey, I understand you were up in Seattle last week for the leadership conference. What did that look like?
Yeah, that was awesome. Great experience. I went last year as well, and then went back this year in an even bigger group this year, and we had an amazing speaker. It was a really good time up there.
How big a group was it?
We probably had maybe 30 minor leaguers, a handful of big leaguers, a lot of the front office, and Seattle coaching up there. So there were a lot of people.
You look around and you just see people from all different levels and all involved and kind of pulling in the same direction. I would imagine that's kind of reassuring, knowing that this is your home, that is the culture that they have.
Exactly. Yeah, you see guys. There were a few guys from the DSL all the way up to Seattle, like Marco and Vogie. Some of those guys were up there. So it was amazing to see that this is really the way Seattle's going, that they're talking that this is what's happening, but it's also showing up that throughout the organization, we're all getting on the same page. So it's really cool to see.
I saw some of the pictures, and you have to admit, Vogie has got the most incredible hair in the big leagues, doesn't he?
I think so, yeah.
And the sweater tied around that. I mean, the style, it looks like he's up the style game a little bit in the off season.
It looks like he's got everything. Got the style, got the personality, everything's working.
Definitely someone fun to have around. Who are some of the people in this organization who have most influenced what you're doing out on the Hill in this short time that you've been with the Mariners?
Gosh, there's a lot of people. I think from the player side of it, I have a good relationship with Cal Raleigh. He's really helped me behind the plate. And then also getting to Arkansas, working with Justin Dunn and Justice Sheffield. Those guys have had, just in the time I was there, had a huge impact on me and really helped me out, kind of took me under their wing and showed me how it's done, stuff like that.
I got to visit that team when they were in Texas. Mariners had a day off when we were there, and so we went over and Double-A. I think you were pitching that day, so we didn't talk to you. But to see how Justice and Justin kind of play off of each other a little bit, it was, they like to take the ball from each other. They mentioned you a little bit. It seems like a really good thing kind of going between a younger group of pitchers.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I showed up there. I could tell right away they were really tight, really close-knit group. And then coming in as the new guy, you see that and you kind of want to distance yourself a little bit, not just jump into it. But they're really welcoming, wanted me to be a part of it, all that stuff, and never skipped a beat, just joined the group and went rolling from there.
What did you get out of that time that you got to spend up in Seattle the last week of the season?
Oh, that was great. Yeah, the last week, Evan, Cal, and I were up there. Just got to sit in on meetings, talk to some of the players, and just learning from some of the veteran guys up there that you see on TV. It's really humbling experience.
Who are some of the veterans that you enjoyed talking with?
I talked to Marco a little bit. They actually had us in a locker next to LeBlanc, who's had a really long career. So it's really cool to see as a minor leaguer after my first season, and I'm sitting next to LeBlanc in the locker and getting to talk to him a little bit, pick his brain. It was really cool.
Did he give you any tips on anything?
We're not as much pitching. We were talking a little bit about what it's like in a long season and way to pace yourself and how much you throw and stuff like that.
That's important. I mean, the season, Major League season is completely different.
Yeah, for sure.
And along those lines, they shut you down at the end of the season.
I know.
How did you deal with that?
That was tough. That's the most important part going into playoffs, and I really wanted to pitch. Of course I know what they're thinking and the reasoning and all that stuff, but it's just tough after such a long season to not be able to pitch.
Yeah, it's you hit, what was it, 135? Is that where you were at?
I think so.
That's a good number right there. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
One of the things that you just mentioned a couple minutes ago, you said Cal Raleigh has been somebody who's really helped you out. How has that relationship developed?
Started last fall, I think, at the high performance camp. That's when I met him. I actually played against him in college a little bit, but didn't know him. And right away, we were just good friends, went back and forth, kind of messed with each other a little bit, but we know that at the end of the day, we have each other's backs. And he's always been, last season, one to push me and call me out whenever it needs to happen, stuff like that, where we're really trying to get the best out of each other.
Why would he need to call you out?
Part of it's just him messing with me, stuff like that. But I think he sees if there's another gear or something like that he really wants to get that out of me. So it's been great to have somebody like that next. I
heard there was a lot of back and forth between, and they let you guys handle that. It wasn't a coach is going to tell you what to do, that you guys all worked out that relationship amongst yourselves.
Oh, yeah. Even before and after that, we were best friends throughout it, really good friends. But, I don't want to make it sound like we were fighting all the time, but there was just maybe one or two times throughout the season where, still being good friends, we just called each other out and what needed to be said to help each other out. It was all about trying to help the other person.
And can it be, a catcher is going to feel a certain responsibility for a game and a pitcher is going to feel a certain responsibility for a game, and you've got to kind of come to an agreement on that, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. I think biggest part for me was I saw how much he cared, that a lot of catchers might just care what their average is or how they're playing or stuff like that, but he really wants to take the pitching staff and make it his. So that's really cool to see. That's
fantastic to hear right there. You mentioned the analytical side, and that's something that you are interested in. What about, I heard that you have a creative bent as well. I heard you play the ukulele?
Oh gosh, I don't know how you heard that one. I tried to learn it. It didn't go too well. I actually got it last Christmas and brought it to spring training thinking I could master it, but it didn't go too well.
Is it around? Is it back there anywhere? Can we hear something?
It's actually in my room, but no, I don't think I can grab it right now.
Well, you bring it to spring training maybe again.
I could try to bring it next time.
We
Yeah,
need a
hopefully I
second
know a
chance.
song or two by then.
All right, we need a second chance at this. This we got to see.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What you mentioned the ukulele, you mentioned the beach. What off the field and your downtime, your time? What do you like to do the most?
Gosh, I like golfing, hanging out with friends. I'm big on movies. I like watching movies and just taking it easy and really enjoying the off season when I can.
What's your favorite movie?
I'm a big Dark Knight fan. I like the Batman series.
Oh, okay.
Probably up there, one of my favorites.
All right. Do you have any holiday traditions that you're looking forward to?
We don't have any big traditions that stick out. We're actually going to New York City for Christmas this year, so hopefully that could become a tradition and get to take a trip every Christmas. That'd be pretty cool.
Have you been there before?
I have, yeah.
All right.
Couple.
All right. Have you ever been to a Yankee game?
I have. Unfortunately, I have to say that I have.
That's okay. No, that's the thing. You grew up in Florida, and that seems to be one of Florida's teams. If you're there, it seems like
Right.
a lot of people from Florida are big Yankee fans. What is your favorite part of your baseball day?
Oh, good question. Favorite part? I love the throwing and all that. I love just going out there every day and knowing that I can get better in some way. I think a really big part of it is just the relationships you build. We've had such a close group and all really good pitchers, but good people as well. So I think just going out there with them and getting to work every day is really fun.
When you set out to get ready for next season, and I'm sure you have goals of where you would like to be. What is your focus when you look at next year?
I think just continuing the stuff I did this year is a really big part of it, trying to take some more steps in the right direction. Of course, I would love to end up in Seattle next year at some point. That's a huge goal of mine, but I know there's a lot of work to be done before that. So just trying to take it one step at a time.
What's your self-scout right now as a pitcher?
What do you mean by that?
If you were a scout looking at yourself, what would you write down?
Man, I might be a little partial, a little biased
That's
towards
okay.
myself, but I think I could be a future, big part of the rotation in the future and eat up a ton of innings and hopefully be an all-star one day. That's always been a goal of mine. So just trying to do anything I can to make it happen.
Is there a pitcher that you kind of looked up to, or a style that you like, or somebody that you look to take something from?
I really like watching Tyler Glasnow. I don't know how much of similarities are there, but I learn a lot from watching him pitch and the way his body moves. So that's always been a guy I enjoy to watch.
Who have you enjoyed to watch on the other side on your team? Is there a hitter that you would probably rather not face, or somebody that you can really appreciate on the offensive side?
Yeah, I think Kellenic might be a tough at bat. Hopefully I won't ever have to face him, but I've seen him go against some really good pitchers and just turn it around, really impressed me. So that might be a guy I want to stay away from.
What are you most looking forward to next year?
Hopefully playing in Seattle. I think that'd be awesome. Just going to work with the same coaches I've had really good relationships with. Pitching to Callaghan's going to be really fun. So just stuff like that, getting back to work at that stuff.
Well, Logan, we are looking forward to seeing you in spring training. Really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.